top Hurricanes recruiting targets just competed at the Rivals Miami Elite Camp, and we've got the scoop.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, if there is such a thing. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC, and host of Post Game on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the extra work. That defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. On this loaded episode, Miami basketball team stays red hot, and they've likely cemented a spot in the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about their huge win at NC State over the weekend. Baseball, by the way, started out hot. Scored like 1,000,000 runs against Lehigh over the weekend. In football, we'll talk about the assistant coaching carousel now at Miami, and if we're concerned about Mario Cristobal having to hire now 3 assistant coaches, we'll talk with our special guest about that. And, of course, we'll talk about where things stand with Miami and some of their top recruiting targets and verbal commits. Now, you have to keep recruiting your own commits because these players are getting calls from other schools left and right. And we are joined by the man, our boy Blue, Larry Blustein. And Blue was out for the full event on Sunday, the Rivals Miami Elite Camp. Blue, I hope you were well, and hope you had your sunscreen on, because I'm sure it was a long, hot day out there.
Yeah, it was. Thanks for having us. Yeah, no, I'm a veteran at being in the sun for all those summer camps. So, long sleeve shirt, long pants, everything. And this is a time of year, they'll have about a 3-4 week stretch where they have some of these national brands come in and have their events. And, it's crazy because some kids compete, some don't. Right. And, it's with the NIL, and you and I talked when we were in San Antonio, and then when we went up to the Under Armour, you're finding now that these NIL, deals, and a lot of the people who hold these NIL deals call the shots. And sometimes they'll tell their clients not to do this or not to attend that. And a lot of these people think, if you're an elite player already set, there's really no reason for you to go, because all you could do is hurt yourself. There's a lot of these ultra competitive players who are so comfortable in their own skin that, I don't care. So if I run a 4.5 or a 4.6, or if I drop a ball, I'm still the dude, I'm still set to go to, wherever, if you're comfortable, in your situation, like we'll talk about Mark Matthews, who I think is just an anomaly. The kid's a beast. He tested and he ran, but he didn't go one-on-ones. And, in these one-on-ones, you have these aggressive kids. And I learned this from Sam Young, who used to play at St. Thomas, went to Notre Dame, played in the NFL. At 6'7", sometimes you're going to get, a 6'7" offensive lineman like him, but sometimes you're going to get these 5'11", 6-foot defensive ends who will get low, and they sometimes will win these wars. They'll win these things. So all that does is make the big 6'7" guy look, oh wow, maybe he's not as good when he is. It's just that sometimes you have these really little guys that are strong, and they're giving their 1,000,000,000% because they want to show. So a lot of these, in those cases, stay away from that because, and I understand, because all you could do is lessen your value, and why would you want to do that? So, right. But that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and you mentioned, Mark Matthews, who obviously doesn't have a whole lot to prove because he's a 5-star. All of the recruiting services have him as the #1 offensive tackle. He can be anywhere ranked from the second best overall player on Rivals to, I think, 10th on ESPN, somewhere in between that for 24/7 Sports. But I do, like you said, I appreciate the fact that Matthews tested.
Yes.
What did you see from Matthews in his testing, and how did he look physically? Because Mark Matthews, number one offensive tackle in the country, trending to Miami. He looks like an absolute monster, Blue.
Yeah, he is. It's amazing. You know what? It's funny because they were going through these drills, and then he was coming by me, and I know Mark, and because I spent some days up there at the Under Armour with him, and I said, "Hey, what's up?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm just competing," and he looked like he was limping, and I said one of the John Santucci, who I was walking with from USA Today, I said, he ain't gonna run. Well, I went over to the side and I was talking to a couple of these line coaches, who come out, and all of a sudden Mark goes, and I said, "Holy mackerel!" I'll tell you what, Alex, he just busted out a run. Like I said, that's it. I said he doesn't even have to do anything the rest of the year.
We're done for the day.
I mean, I'm a big, one of those guys that think, when was the last time an offensive tackle had to run 40 yards? The answer is never. So, but that's why I always think that they should test these offensive linemen. And who am I? I'm just a regular dude. But they should test them 10 and 20 yards, boom, boom, because that's what they're going to do. But I'll tell you what, he took that 40 to task, and he went to it. And I said, you know what, he doesn't have to do a thing the rest of the day. And he didn't. He just hung out and watched. But yeah, he's special. You don't see, first of all, offensive linemen that are cut up like that. And he's got, veins popping out his legs and veins popping out of his arms. And you don't see that. That's at 6'6", bordering around 300 pounds. And he's a good guy, very technically sound, very athletic. And if anybody lives up to the, and there were several guys there, and we'll talk about them that lived up to the expectations. But Mark's a guy. He's a prize, whoever gets him. And, and he walks on campus. He's going to be the dude, stays healthy. He's another Francis Mawanoa. He's another one of those guys that you say, hey, different level, hold, he stays healthy, and he's a first round, NFL pick. So.
Well, there's a committed Miami Hurricanes potential future offensive lineman I want to ask you about, plus a rising prospect that Miami really likes, and a couple of other Miami commits at different positions competed over the weekend. I need to pick Blue's brain because, again, I think Miami's class of 2027, Blue and I talked about it a week ago, I think Miami has an opportunity for a top 5 class, certainly another top 10 class. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started with Larry Blustein on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. Skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles upon your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours just made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates. Less stress, less time, more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On Canes. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. And if you're an everydayer, make your status official by joining the all-access tier of the Everydayers Club. Hit the link in the show notes below or go directly to lockedoncanes.supercast.com. If you join that all-access tier, you get exclusive episodes with me, an exclusive newsletter, one-on-one texting with me, and so many more benefits. Go to lockedoncanes.supercast.com to learn more and become an everydayer today. We're joined here by the great Larry Blustein, Prep Red Zone, Florida, 104.3 WQAM, the Sixth Ring Cane. All right, so Blue, an offensive lineman who is verbally committed to Miami for the class of 2027, Palm Beach Central O-lineman Zaquan Linton competed, and I love what I see from him physically. 6'5", 300 plus pounds now. He's added some size to his frame. He looks the part. Like, this is not a bad 300. This is a quality 300 pounds. The guy's in really good condition. Looked a little raw to me in some of the reps that I saw. So maybe this is one of those things where we kind of hope Mario Cristobal and Alex Mirabal, as they've done so many times, will develop this young man into a top offensive lineman. He's a 3-star prospect with a lot of potential. What have you seen from Linton?
Well, 100%. You know what you said. I mean, he's got a lot to learn, and obviously he's going to have some time to learn. Technically, that's really what makes a lineman. I mean, you could be big and you could be strong and you could be quick and fast, but if you're not technically sound, you're going to fall behind. And that's the good thing of having somebody like at Miami, having an offensive line coach, a guy who stresses his offensive line. And as you can see, that's what Miami's built on. And then having a great, coach like Coach Mirabal to, kind of refine things. He's got a ways to go. He's got the size. He's got some athleticism about him, and he works with a lot of people. And this is a guy who, this is the one thing. He's not going to let the grass grow under his feet because he's working. He's competing in those. There's a new thing out now over the last couple of years. It's equivalent to the 7-on-7, circuit that the skill kids, the quarterbacks, wide receivers, defensive backs go through. It's called 5-on-5, and it's a line. You as a team, you compete as a line. And I mean, and I'll tell you, guys like Mauanoa and people like that are hugely behind it. I mean, they're behind that because, they coach kids out from California. A lot of the, so they're at, him and Okunlolo and a lot of those guys, they're at those 5-on-5 events, helping to refine the position. And, it's not a glamour position. So these big guys now are getting an opportunity to compete, and they get better the whole summer, where they would usually just go to camps, like go to Miami camp or in Alabama or whatever, and, go against these guys and learn a little bit, because if you have 80, 90 linemen, there's you can't be teaching everybody individually, but in preparation for these 5-on-5s that a lot of these guys are like Linton are involved in, they work out a couple times a week, and they have coaches, line coaches working, where it's like either it's Torian Wilson or, crafting linemen or somebody like that, they're working with them, teaching them better techniques. So when they do compete, before the spring and before, they start the 2026 season, they're getting better. And I think that's where Linton's going to improve between now and the 2 months before spring. Spring starts at the end of April, early May. And then during the camp in August, when they start for real, I think that you're going to see him pick up a lot of momentum. Is he going to come in and be a Matthews or a Sean Tatum? Probably not. But you know what? He has the package and the athletic ability and the size to one day be at that level. And, I think because of the advantages of going to these 5-on-5s and being part, of this group that instead of just showing up and, okay, we'll go lift weights and watch film. Now they actually is practical. They actually go out there and they work on, swim moves, and they go work on, working at a guard. And that's the one thing too, because you get these line coaches, and there's a lot of really good line coaches that are around, and they'll teach these guys specifics. And, that's the Ryan Rodriguez's and the Buchanans are kind of the wave of the future, where you're going to learn 2 and 3 positions, and you're going to be valuable to that team, not as just a center or not as just a right or left tackle, but you're going to be able to position yourself where you know every one of those positions. Even if you're not a tackle, they'll teach you and show you, because you have to have an understanding, if you're a left guard, what the left tackle's function is. So, and nobody's ever done that before, Alex. And, and from a standpoint of concentrating and paying that much attention to it. So in essence, somebody like a Linton will improve over what you saw from film in the next couple of weeks, just by learning something. And somebody like a Jason Taylor is a perfect example of teaching somebody 1 or 2 things, and then Nick Benito. And I keep bringing up that story when they played Bosco that year. And he showed him just one move, and he kind of applied it, and he got a sack in the game. So, and that's where coaching comes in. And I know that's a segue to what you're going to talk about next.
Well, no doubt. We'll get to coaching in a second, but first, your take on a couple of Miami verbal commits, a couple more, because obviously Zaquan Linton is one of them. We also had athlete, but he's going to play tight end at the college level, Demarcus Deroche from Cardinal Gibbons, and Amari Stevens, the wide receiver from Chaminade, also competed. What did you see from those two?
Well, Deroche is one of those guys that, you define him as a tight end, but he can play wide receiver. He could probably play D end. He could probably play safety. He's a very athletic guy. I mean, this is a guy who's a great basketball player. I mean, people have to understand that that's the sport that he really started to make his mark in. He's got big hands, obviously, as a basketball player. He knows how to body up. As far as if he's going against a linebacker or a safety, he's got that ability because of his basketball skills, to play that position. And I watched him yesterday, and he had some separation on a couple of the plays. And, even though that he was running with they didn't have a great big group of tight ends. So you're running with the wide receivers, which means you're getting corner safeties. So who are a lot different than linebackers. So they're going to stick to you a little bit more, but being 6'5", he's got, if a quarterback, and they had a few quarterbacks out there, like, the kid Verpale was going to Pitt, and a couple of the other guys like Zach Katz and some of the other quarterbacks who were on hand, they're smart enough to know that, he's against now a 5'11", 6-foot corner who has the speed and who has that athleticism. But let me throw it a little bit higher, because he's got, being a basketball guy, he's got some vert to him. So automatically he's going to out jump him. And that's what happened yesterday when he made some catches. Amari Stevens is another one. Remember, he caught a touchdown pass for St. Thomas as a freshman in the state championship game against Homestead. So he's been at that level. He's been at a couple of places, kind of found a home at Chaminade now, with some other receivers. Geno Smith's younger brother being one of those guys that is in that group of receivers over at Chaminade. But Amari runs great patterns. He's a tough kid. He always has the attitude about himself that I'm going to beat that DB and I'm the better of the two. And anytime you go into that, you always have a great advantage from a mental standpoint. And I think he's increasingly getting better. He's going to have an opportunity this year, pairing himself with Tremone Isaac, who's another rising kid, a young stud, 28 kid. So I think he's going to be pushed. And that's the one thing you need, because you get to that level and sometimes you're the only guy. And, and it from the sport of wrestling, if you get a guy who's like a 195 pounder, but if he has nobody to work with on either side of him, no one's ever going to push him. So, but in his case, he's got some DBs. He's playing in a 7-on-7 situation where he's getting pushed, so I like him a lot. I think he's, he was one of the first commitments in this 2027 group. I think last year at this time. So I think he's really going to be one of those players that's going to continue to get better. He's got a ceiling that's very high. He runs well. I don't know if he ran a 4.47 yesterday. I think I saw that.
Wow.
Which is flying.
Yeah.
Which is flying. But yeah, no, he runs well. He knows how to run patterns. In this day and age, in the Geno Smith or the Jeremiah Smith day and age, where you're bigger, faster, stronger than the opposition, sometimes you say, well, you know what, I don't really need to learn how to run patterns because I'm just going to run by the guy. Yeah. But in your great teaching of wide receivers and guys like coaches that are at all these schools and that are teaching technique to everybody, he's picking up more and more, and it's going to make him a much better receiver at that next level.
It's good to know. And as we all know, a big part of recruiting is not only getting new players to verbally commit and ultimately sign, but it's also playing defense, Blue, because you mentioned Deroche and Amari Stevens have both been committed to Miami for a long time in the class of 2027. And I know they've been hearing from other schools. Deroche will take supposedly an official visit to Texas. He's got that scheduled. According to E.J. Holland of Kane Sports, Stevens has been hearing from schools like Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, LSU. So big-time schools are competing for these players. Blue, Miami's going to try and keep these guys locked up until signing day in December, so there's a long way to go.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, preventing these kids from taking other visits, that's kind of old school now. I mean, because you got to let them explore and you got to let them see what's out there.
Miami usually lets them explore. There are certain, like you mentioned, old school. I know, like Dabo Sweeney at Clemson, his policy is if you're verbally committed, you take a visit elsewhere, we're pulling your offer. Like that's his. Miami will usually let guys go experience other things, and hopefully you come back home when your visits are over.
Yeah, well, in this day too, with these deals and hey, we could get you X amount of dollars, and these kids are all ears. You got to play that game. Everybody else is just as long as you're comfortable to know that, as you mentioned, next December they're going to be signing on the dotted line. And in a school like Miami, you're coming off a national championship appearance. You're coming off arguably the best recruiting class that they've had top to bottom, whether rivals or anybody else understands it. To me, I don't go on stars, but I go on based on how they're going to fit into the system. Yes. And to me, Miami, if you look at the 2026 class from top to bottom, you say to yourself, when you get towards the end of that 3-star deal, you say to yourself, well, wait a minute, Reese Woodard could be the strongest guy in the class, so if you're going to say, oh, well, he's just another throw-in, he's not. He's going to compete, and he is already. And guys like that, you take a look at the kid Dunnigan from Kansas.
He's going to be so good.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. And I went over.
Is he the best player to ever come out of the state of Kansas, by the way?
Well, he and the kid Brown, if you remember the running back that Miami got.
I do.
And,
that's right.
Ended up at Tennessee, and they were from Kansas. But that's a good point, because you don't really, and that's the thing. It's a stigma thing. Because all of a sudden someone's going, well, he's from Kansas or he's from Wyoming, if you take a look at things like that. That's what's happening now. Miami's recruiting based on the fit. And whether some analyst from rivals who doesn't really know everything about the game, I'm being nice here. They're not going to be telling Mario Cristobal, hey, you know what, this guy, he's a low star. No, this guy fits what I watched him. This guy fits what we're doing. And I think if they go on this class here, as you mentioned, they're off to a great start for 2027. But if this 2026 class, and tonight, I'm going to be talking about the class with Gabby Urrutia, on our show. And I just think that people don't realize, and I've, since the early 60s, I've seen Miami's classes. And this is one of those classes that in a couple years, and you remember when you were going to school there and you go to spring game and you walk behind the bench and you see these names and you go, oh my God, I forgot they had him. See, that's where Miami's getting, and that's when you know you're going to be in the national hunt every year, when you have guys like David Jefferson, who hasn't even played yet, or, people like that, like Steve Walsh, who, guys, oh, I forgot they recruited Steve Walsh, people like that. And Miami's in that mode now, where you're going to, and they're stockpiling these linemen and guys who were in that last class, like Buchanan and Wilkerson and Campbell and players like that, are elevated to the point where they're ready to step in, where the next level is going to be in their position. And that's how you do it. And, mixed in with your NIL deals and your transfer portals. That's how you build in 2026.
Well, coming up next, I want to gauge Blue's level of concern for, Miami needing to hire now 3 assistant coaches, with Zach Etheridge recently departing for the NFL. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. This is Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who show there's more to the score than what's on screen. You know who moved the game forward? True Washington. Welcome back to Miami Hoops. True had just missed 3 games. 2 of them he was away from the team for personal reasons. The third, he had just come back. Jay Lucas gave him some extra time during that North Carolina game. And against NC State, not only was True Washington back, he hit, when he was fouled shooting a 3-pointer right at the end of the game, hit 3 clutch free throws with ice in his veins to propel the Miami Hurricanes to another quad 1 victory, essentially locking the Hurricanes into the NCAA tournament. Moments like that remind us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put the same energy into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Folks, we're also proudly brought to you by FanDuel. Ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person? FanDuel is giving you the chance to turn that dream into reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking the team to win the championship or grab a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're joined here by Larry Blustein. All right, so Blue, I'm sure Mario Cristobal wants to have the staff complete again in time for spring football, which is probably a little over a month away. We've had the long opening at tight ends coach with Cody Woodall departing to go back home to Mississippi to work with Ole Miss. And we lost 2 coaches to the Arizona Cardinals. Running backs coach Matt Merritt joined the Cardinals staff last week, a few days ago. Cornerbacks coach Zach Etheridge joined him. And I said it on my show, Blue, this is a symptom of success. You have a great team and a great staff. NFL teams are going to start calling your guys for promotions. But with that said, any concern about having to fill these 3 spots? And do you think Mario can find a staff with as much chemistry as what we just had this past year?
Yeah, the latter is kind of tough to answer because you never really know until they get, till everybody mixes in with one another. And we know that from the trial and error that has been, Mario's regime here. Every year there's always changes made. But to answer the first part of your question, that's what he's doing now. I mean, while everybody else is, watching film and looking at the recruits and seeing, the board, and Mario is going through all of his contacts. And, who wouldn't want to come here? First of all, if you're a running back coach, come on. It's a
Yeah.
no-brainer. I mean, you can almost put it in auto drive,
Yeah.
and even as a seasoned coach, learn some things from yourself because you have just such an array of talent coming out, guys that are going to be playing in the NFL some days. So from that standpoint, yeah, I think that all the positions that they lost, tight end wise, I mean, that's probably the thinnest part of Miami's, arsenal on the offensive side right now. But
Yeah.
you get a coach in there, and who knows, he may have a tie or two with somebody else that he may bring with him, or somebody that they know that so I don't think it's a concern. We've been down this road the last 3-4 years where you go close to spring and you don't have this guy or you don't have that guy. I think over the next week or two you're going to see those positions start to be filled, because as well as I, there's a long line at all three of those positions that have turned in their resumes, and they're going over them now. Believe me, this isn't a program that I got to stay away from Miami. I mean, come on, they were one of the best.
Yeah, I know a couple people who have put resumes in for a couple of these open jobs.
Yeah,
so I know, yeah,
and rightfully so. And you do that, and then all of a sudden, like I said, they'll be filled, and the chemistry part takes care of itself. I mean, especially during spring, because everybody's working for the same goal. Everybody, especially a lot of these guys who are tweeners looking for, slotting behind starters, because I mean, let's face it, we've got, you look at the 22 starters, and for the most part, all of those positions are either filled or about to be filled during the spring. Now what it is the depth. And that's why getting, these coaches on board, because they're going to go through the evaluation period, during, the spring, because spring just isn't about the game. It's the entire spring, scrimmages, workouts, daily, this and that, and how much, this guy's worked hard enough to earn that number 2, position behind that starter. So no, I don't look at it as a problem. This is I think it's, like I said, in the next 1 or 2 weeks, you're going to have the entire staff filled, and then they start getting on the same page. And as you said, we're like about a month out from spring. And again, every spring is going to be important from now on, especially because you have so many new faces that, it's not a question of how good they are. It's just how they're going to start working with one another. I mean, and unlike last spring, you got your quarterback that's going to be taking part like Cam Ward did 2 years ago. And weren't we thrilled when, in this, that all the positives that came out of spring, well, this kid's going to be a different level. And then in the spring game, he threw for 450 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then all of a sudden the world was good. And I think that's what's going to happen again. So, yeah, no, I don't. There's no panic. They've got more than enough. As you said, people have turned in resumes, and I'm sure that stack is on his desk and he's going through them, and they'll have some interviews and they'll come in, and and then they'll weed out the process. You know how that is. And what Mario wants to hear something from the running backs coach, like, come in and go, hey, you know what? I mean, this is a great group. I'm just going to take them up a notch. That's what he wants to hear. He does. You don't want someone to come in on Mark Fletcher. Oh my gosh, they want somebody that's going to come in and take Mark to the next level and get him ready for the NFL. And that's and you look at Brown, same thing. Brown's going to come down the line next year at this time and hopefully be in somebody's NFL, their camp. So that's what you're doing. You're trying to elevate. When you bring in these coaches, you're just trying to elevate, what the last coaches have done. And certainly, we haven't been disappointed the way the coaches have, especially this past year. They all came through with flying colors on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, they sure did. Right now, Blue, it's a great time to be a Miami Hurricanes sports fan, even beyond football, because the basketball team, within the last 5 days, they get signature wins at home against North Carolina, and they go at NC State, who's having a really good season, really tough place to play. And not only did Miami win, Blue, but the way that they came back, They score the final 8 points of the game in under a minute left. They go on an 8-0 run. I mentioned the clutch free throws by True Washington. Malik Renew goes off for 26 points in the game. And baseball over the weekend. I know it was Lehigh, but I mean, it was basically a perfect weekend. They scored like 55 runs in 3 nights against Lehigh. It was insane. Home run after home run after home run. I think, Blue, we're entering a golden era, as Mario Cristobal recently said, for Miami athletics.
I agree. I mean, everybody's, stepping up and, like look at basketball this time last year. You lost your coach at this time last year. He stepped aside and then all of a sudden everything was gloom and doom and they go, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Miami was in the Final Four. Now they're not, even the best in their own conference or anywhere near it. And then all of a sudden you strike gold with somebody like Jai Lucas, who, obviously a great coach, learned under some pretty good people at Duke, watched how that program, and then all of a sudden his ties in recruiting. And I think, from talking to some people in the know, next year is going to be even better because he's got all these guys that are going to come in next year that, were kind of tied up this year, for one reason or another. And I think I think Miami, especially in this situation, and it's awfully tough because, in this, one and done era of college basketball, it's tough to build anything concrete. But if you look at Miami's success, when they had success, they've always had veteran type of teams. Yep. And certainly Lucas is, even though they were all individual type of talent, they've all come. I mean, listen, this you made a great point. This NC State, any game really, like Virginia Tech tomorrow night, any game in the ACC is going to be tough. I don't care who it is. I mean, look at Florida State. They beat Miami, and Florida State is not really an upper echelon team, and then Cal beat Miami. And so it's going to happen, but then Miami turns around, as you said, beat North Carolina. They beat NC State in a game, and NC State was playing really well. And, I mean, if you were a fan, you were frustrated because you had, there were like seconds left and Miami's behind. Yeah. And then all of a sudden they get a foul, shooting a 3-pointer, and boom, and they win the game. So, yeah, that's pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, it was massive. And Jay Lucas, fastest ACC coach to get his first 20 wins since 1997. I mean, he's having a great season. Blue, let us know. You're going to be on tonight, Monday night, on 104.3 WQAM from 6 to 8 p.m. Larry Blustein has the most informative radio show in the country. Let people know what they can expect tonight at 6.
Yeah, we talk a little bit of, a lot. There's, not all these football players are elite. I mean, some of them are on the fence where they're going to go. And the Orange Bowl showcase has stepped up over the last decade to put on a really good event where the kids go out and they perform in front of smaller schools who are giving scholarships, who are providing financial assistance. And Dave Shula, a former NFL coach, player, obviously the son of the great Don Shula, has been really active in putting these events together, and he's going to join us. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Nick Wilson, who was at from USA Today, was at Rivals yesterday. We'll kind of look back on the Rivals camp as well. Gabby Urrutia, everybody knows him, does a nice job. Gabby and I are going to talk about the 2026 class that seems like nobody's talking about, these incoming freshmen, but this might be the best group, as we mentioned, to come along in a long time. And so it's going to be a really good show. We're looking forward to it. Obviously, every week we talk other schools. We'll talk UCF tonight. We'll talk FSU. So try to keep everybody in the loop. And then, this week, and then we'll start getting into some college coaches. Mario Cristobal, hopefully will be with us next week and next Monday night. And, because everybody is grabbing Mario and wants to talk about national championship. And I want to talk about this class that people don't realize. I think people are sweeping under the rug, but this is how you maintain and become, having a Milan Paris or a Samarian Wingo come in there and get an opportunity to do what Joshua Moore did last year. And that's how you win. And it's going to be exciting. Hope you tune in 6 to 8 tonight on 104.3 FM WQAM.
I love it. Larry Blustein does an incredible job. He's our boy Blue. Thanks everyone so much for being here. Make sure you become an everydayer. Hit the link in the show notes below. Join the all access tier for exclusive content. And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the #1 Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.